Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can enable stop protection and termination protection through both in the console and or through the CLI. So here I have the AWS Management Console on the right and the AWS CLI on the left. I will start with the console as usual, and we can then do the same in the AWS CLI or in the terminal. Now, enabling stop protection for an EC2 instance is done in order to prevent an instance from being accidentally stopped. And the termination protection is done in order to prevent your instance from being accidentally terminated. So let's get our hands on this lab and see how to do this. So here in the console, we have to go to EC2, and we have an instance running ready for us. And the instance is here, Nautilus EC2. So in order to enable stop protection, click the checkbox on the left side to select the EC2 instance and go to Actions, go to Instance Settings, and change Stop Protection. So the stop protection, enable it and save. This is how you enable the stop protection. Now, to make sure it's enabled, go down here in the description and you should see it somewhere here. It's right here, stop protection enabled. Okay, you can disable it in the same way. So go to Instance Settings, change stop protection, and just uncheck the checkbox and click Save. And here it is, disabled immediately. Okay, so the same way for the termination protection. So you click the checkbox for off the instance, go to Actions, Instance Settings, change termination protection, and click Enable. You save and you should see it right here, termination protection enabled. The same way you disable it. So you go to Actions and you change the termination protection. You uncheck the enable. You can see the sign here. And the termination protection is disabled. So this is done. This is the first part of this episode. And the next part is the same, but via the CLI. And you can also see the changes here when you work it out in the CLI. So let's see how to do it. We go and type in AWS EC2. And we need to grab this instance ID. But now we need to grab it from here, from the terminal, because we're doing everything in the CLI. And we're not using this, but this one I kept it open just to show you that the changes are also occurring here. So AWS EC2, describe instances. This will show you all instances, but we only have one, so it's fine. We can go up here and grab the instance ID. You may add to this command to make it more visual friendly. You can type in grep ID to grab any line with ID, with the string ID. Make sure the I is capital because it's case sensitive. So now the return will be all the lines from the describe instances command that contain ID. This is the instance, and here's all the IDs you have for the instance, image ID, instance ID. But what we care about is the instance ID. So we copy it. And now we go ahead and we modify the attribute, which is the stop protection. But before we do it, let's check it. Maybe it's enabled, maybe it's disabled. You can check it before. So to do this, you go ahead and type in AWS EC2 describe instance attribute. For what instance? The instance ID for the instance you're focusing on. Add the flag of attribute. What attribute we're looking at? It's called disable API stop. Now, to make things look easier, just in your head, imagine the word protection instead of the term disable. So disable API stop will become stop protection, and its value is false, which means it's off. And now we need to turn it on by using the proper command. So here's a visual representation of the command. So just in your head, don't think about API. Disable here means protection. You're protecting the instance. Let's call it protection. And now we have stop protection. False means off, which also means disabled. And finally, we're left with the following phrase: stop protection disabled. Now the same logic goes for the termination protection. You just replace stop with termination. Okay, so now to enable the stop protection, we type in AWS EC2 modify instance attribute. For the same instance, copy paste the ID again of the instance. The attribute we're going to modify is the stop protection. To enable it, we type in disable API stop. And this means we're turning on the disable API stop, which in itself is the stop protection. Now we can go back to the previous command and check. And here now we have it as true. So disable API stop is true, which means that the stop protection is enabled. And as we said in the beginning, we can check our work inside the console. You can actually go inside the instance by clicking on its ID under instance ID. Scroll down, and here it is, stop protection enabled. Now to disable it, it's just the same command which we used to enable it, but before the disable, just type in no and dash. And now it's disabled. You can make sure by describe instance attribute command, and here you have it as false. And if we refresh here, we will see that it's disabled. Okay, so now the same goes for the termination protection. To enable the termination protection, which is currently disabled, let's make sure it's disabled from the CLI. Just imagine that we don't have the console and we only have the CLI. So to make sure, we type in AWS EC2 describe instance attribute. For the instance ID, the same ID that we have for the same instance, and we type in the flag attribute, and the attribute we want to check is called disable API termination. Okay, so it says disable API termination is false. In other words, protection termination is disabled. Protection termination is false. And it's obvious when you double check it in the console. So disable API termination is false, the same logic as we spoke about in the previous command for the disable API stop. And this means that the termination protection is off. And to turn on the termination protection, we use a slightly modified version of the command used to modify or to enable the stop protection. So modify instance attribute, the instance ID, which is the same, of course. And now to enable termination protection, we type in 2 dashes, disable API termination. Oops, termination. Okay, should be done. So we can check it here and it's true. So as you see, it changed to true, which means that the termination protection is enabled. Now here we can refresh to see the change. And here it is, termination protection is enabled. To disable it, just go back before disable and add no dash, and the command will be reversed. And you can verify this by checking the describe instance attribute. As you see, disable API termination is false. You may also refresh the console and it will appear here as disabled. That's all, folks. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.